Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, Jeff Linder, Behren Morton, and this NIL era. We're tying them all together next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Thanks for making us your first listen with the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you, my man, and we've got what I consider to be a fun and fruitful exercise today. Chris and I no longer spring chickens, so we're diving into some word association Wednesday today just to keep the mentals sharp. We could try to put, shaped blocks into shaped holes, things like that. May not be that great for a podcast. So we're going to go linguistically sharp here today and touch on a few different things and some words, phrases, descriptors that come to mind. So would love for you to play along out there in the audience, dive into the YouTube comments. If you feel like dusting it up, the water is always warm. Chris, let's get started, and let's get started with something that was finally made official by Texas Tech here this week, and that was the announcement of a new assistant for Grant McCasland's basketball staff, and I should say a new old assistant for Grant McCasland because obviously they've got a connection going back to Midland College, and they both, I think it was Coach Linder, actually, Jeff Linder, that shared a picture on his Twitter account of the two with some very young children that have grown since then. Some 90s style haircuts that I'm sure have, I don't know if they've grown or faded possibly since then, but was kind of cool to see. So when I throw the first one at you, Jeff Linder, what's coming to mind for you?
Yeah, I'm gonna be off the grid here a bit. I'm gonna give you my word here is Kip.
Kip Dynamite? Been chatting with chicks all day.
You're gonna say what the world are you talking about? Do you remember the diner back in the day, Kip's Big Boy? With the big statue out. Yeah, like and he'd have the burger or whatever. And I always thought that statue was like, legit. And it was like an iconic, as a kid, right?
Sure.
I don't remember how many Kip's Big Boys there were. But those statues are now, I think there may be even one at Cook's Garage in Lubbock, Texas, or a miniature version somewhere. But
awesome.
Anyway, I thought Kip because this was a big boy move. Okay. So that's what I'm going to play off of there. This was a straight up big boy move because, like, I don't know if everybody has followed kind of the domino that this has caused. The domino effect of this hire actually made national news yesterday. So follow me.
Yes, it did.
Yeah. Okay. So Jeff Linder made the move to work with his longtime friend Grant McCasland. Leaves a head coaching spot to be a top assistant at Texas Tech in a Power 4 league, which we have hinted at that a lot of folks are kind of starting to look at. And I think that, I don't know, intended or unintended, or maybe nobody cared, but one of the things that's going to happen is on the consequences of NIL and all these things is like the mid-major in college basketball is going to have a coach drain. I just think that that's going to be kind of a bit more normal where you see some of that. Whereas like when Chris Beard hired Chris Ogden away from UTA a few years ago, whenever he left Texas Tech, everybody was like, wow, that is crazy. Now it's become a bit more normal, but this is still a big boy move. So when Linder comes to Texas Tech, you have a guy named Sundance Wicks, former Linder assistant at Wyoming that was the head coach at Green Bay. He goes back to Wyoming. Doug Gottlieb, yes, that Doug Gottlieb is now the head coach at Green Bay, radio host and all, and all that was still. But it was a domino effect, all be caused by Grant McCasland's hire of Jeff Linder. And so this is, and I think you'll see that he was making 700 plus was Jeff Linder as the head coach a couple of years ago. I think it was a bit more last year, but I think he's going to get paid more than what he was making at Wyoming to be an assistant here, which is a pretty big step for Texas Tech basketball. But this is kind of what it takes. And I don't know what they settled on or anything like that, but we're all talking economics and finances these days. And I was like, man, is he just taking him? Because he wasn't being run out of Laramie. He still could have stayed there for, now he needed to win, but I don't know if it was just like he could have stayed there for forever. But I just was curious about that. But that's kind of the word that you get, is that he got a bit more to come here.
He kipped him. All right. There's a lot to consider there. And you and I are actually going to be kind of on the same track with my word. There's so many things, though, to chew on in what you just said. First off, Sundance Wicks. Like, if you're in the basketball business, it's got to be in Wyoming or somewhere in the West, right? Is his assistant Butch Candle? Or like, who's the next guy that he's going to hire for his staff? That's an amazing name. Doug Gottlieb has now paved also the path for the rest of us. Now, I know I announced my candidacy for this position that Coach Linder wound up taking, so I didn't get this one. But Coach Gottlieb, radio host Gottlieb, has now paved the path, Chris. You and I, other former radio folks, podcast hosts, to become a head coach someday. So the dream is still very much alive. So thank you for blazing that trail. My word is coup, along the same lines. C-O-U-P. Sounds like a great name for a set of twins. Kip and Coup. Kip and Coup Cowan. But I'm going the same way, just because I think you pulled off a big, successful action that at least to me, Chris, and look, I'm as hopeful about, Texas Tech's ability to do what they want to do as anyone. But I was kind of taken aback by this. And whenever you said a few weeks ago, hey, look out for when we talk targets as far as assistant coaches to fill that role, you said look out for a potential head coaching target. And I'm thinking, okay, who could that possibly be? And I was a little surprised by that. But here we see it come to fruition. So I'm going to go coup. Chris is going Kip's big boy. And you can let us know what you think out there in the YouTube comments. Before we move on from Coach Linder, Chris, I was really kind of wondering, as we're still, of course, sitting here within portal season, the season that I suppose never truly actually ends. Does Coach Linder's addition get you into any new target conversations? Are there obvious options out there that kind of maybe open up a relationship here? I know we already talked about one guy. Who was it? I think Texas Christian signed a Wyoming transfer not too long ago. But is it too late in the game for that kind of thing to happen? Or do you think there's potentially some new names that could become involved now that Coach Linder's involved with Texas Tech?
Yeah, without getting into specifics here, I think it's a very fair question to ask about his roster back at Wyoming. Some coaches have different feelings about that. Like, man, I'm not gonna go there, and other coaches are like, oh no, I'm gonna sink my teeth into. You're coming with. It has to fit and all that, but I would even expand it to like the league that he was in too. I mean, or recently recruited players. There may not be anybody there that you necessarily because I mean, not a knock on like Wyoming per se, but they may not be sitting there with a bunch of guys that make sense for you. Or even newly recruited or current players or guys that maybe, because I think that, the young man that ended up at TCU that, came through here on a visit, he is somebody that, I was told, whenever they were looking at him, hey, this will be a rotational piece. That this wasn't like a thought to be like, okay, starter. It was more of a depth, experienced rotational piece. Not into the bench. That's too harsh, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah,
it wasn't an immediate impact player. So yeah, I think it opens up a different. And look, these conversations would have already happened. Trust me. This is we're probably 2 weeks behind on this kind of. Conversation happening, maybe even more, could have been, when they first talked about this, hey, what do you think? I mean, because that was always now, do I think that Grant hired Coach Linder to bring players? or be just a really good coach. No, I think he hired him to be a really good coach, organizer, administrator, X's and O's, recruiter, all checking all the boxes, which is why you hire a guy like this. But it wasn't just because he could bring in a player or three or whatever. But he's going to have some, phone calls that you can get into now that you probably couldn't previously.
All right, onward to the next one. Let us know how you guys feel about that, what you're associating with Jeff Linder in the YouTube comments. Next, name, image, and likeness. First, today's episode brought to you by eBay Motors. And eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and keep that ride or die ride on the road, or elevate your car's game to the next level of performance. Superchargers, exhaust kits, LED headlights, roof racks, and accessories of all kinds to fit your style. Whether it's power, speed, or design you're into, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts to perfectly fit what you need. Just head over to ebay.com/motors now, where you'll always find exactly what you're looking for, and at no risk because of eBay's guaranteed fit. Your part is guaranteed to fit just right every time, or your money back, keeping you burning rubber and not burning cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to keep your ride or die on the road and moving your life forward at ebay.com/motors. eBay guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, exclusions do apply. The NIL era, and I'll kick this one off, Chris, because I'm going with the word overdue, but in a way that maybe you might not anticipate. I think the overdueness of this era could actually give some indication as to why we're seeing the wildness of this era, almost like a college kid gone wild. They just had all this pent-up energy. They never even had a taste of a beer or whatever it might be all along the way, and then they get out of mama and daddy's roof, and they've gone insane for a period of hopefully maybe just a weekend, sometimes 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, or the rest of your life. We never know. But I sort of feel like, Chris, the fact that this has been overdue, and I know it's so long, I guess long time coming, and I know it's not the same, people participating that didn't get it once upon a time that are now getting it. But I think that same type of attitude is out there because there's probably also got to be a sense of, is this going to go away? How does this change whenever it goes to a revenue sharing model, which I think is going to be actually a very interesting transition. Not that you're losing NIL, but I do wonder if you get some less motivated funders of NIL at that point when there's revenue to be shared by the university. And I'm kind of feeling like at that point it's, say hello to the new sheriff. It's the old sheriff, as in the university is going to control the cash once again. But for this NIL era, I'm going with overdue. It doesn't mean I love every angle of it, but I do support any human anywhere being able to monetize their name, image, likeness, ability, talent, whatever it may be. I never understood why an Oklahoma quarterback was not allowed to sell, Chevrolet pickups or whatever, just because they're 18 to 22.
Rhett Bomar.
That's
wow.
right.
Yeah.
So there are some things that I certainly approve of as far as the NIL era. Some things I think could be better managed, I suppose, but I'm going with overdue. There are a lot of options here, and I bet we get some things across the board if we hear from the audience on this one. But what's coming to mind for you when you think about this NIL era?
Do you know who Fred McFeely was?
I can't say I'm familiar with Fred McFeely.
Okay, I bet you are. You just didn't know it.
Okay.
Fred McFeely was Mr. Rogers. Okay, that Fred McFeely was his real name in Mr. Rogers. And there was that show. There's been movies about it. Tom Hanks did it. There's been documentaries about, Fred McFeely was just this nicest man. They put him on TV, and it was this little kid show. But the name of his show was Neighborhood. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, right? Yeah. And they would often talk about sharing. So my word here is neighborhood, because in that neighborhood they had to share. Little Ricky had 2 race cars, okay? And then Sally was sitting there watching Ricky play. And so Mr. Rogers would go over there and go, Ricky, can you give Sally a play car too? Okay. And then they're both, running around with their little cars and everything like that. And then he'd look at the camera and he'd be like, this is sharing, boys and girls. Now Ricky and Sally both have a car. This is what we need to do, whatever. Okay. So kind of corny, but that's what this is. We are now in the neighborhood era because everybody, hey, can you check my mail and all that? But we are sharing. We are sharing with because revenue sharing is coming. We are sharing the money with the athletes, which is what people have long since been arguing that you should do. We can argue or disagree with the way we got here or how it's being done. But bottom line is we are sharing, and then like the university or football programs or basketball programs, you are sharing the problem of how to get this money with your donors and your fans. So again, it's all shared here. We need to get the money to these kids. We have some money, but we need help. And so again, it's just we're sharing is caring, right? But neighborhood, Fred McFeely, Mr. Rogers. It took me a while to get there, but this is ultimately what this whole thing is about: is sharing the pieces of pie that we've all known was there, and that's why others are being really, angry with and forceful with trying to get the biggest pieces of pie they can because they're going to have to share said piece of pie.
I think they made a great decision to go with also Mr. Rogers' neighborhood as opposed to Mr. McFeely's neighborhood.
Fred McFeely.
That's a whole different channel, and probably a guy that's driving a windowless van. It reminds me of a buddy of mine who had a jug of wine once upon a time, and we thought he had a date that was going somewhere. It didn't go somewhere, and it turned out he was just being a little too McFeely. And so he got ran off the tracks before it ever got started. So I think that was a quality decision to go and welcome them to Mr. Rogers' neighborhood as opposed to Mr. McFeely's neighborhood. What do you think about the second angle of my answer? When revenue sharing is put into place officially with the university, do you think at that point that there will be some supporters? I know it won't be all. It absolutely will not be all. But some supporters or boosters or donors that have been funding these collectives in the NIL angle, because those are two separate things. Do you think that could potentially lose any steam at all when they're thinking, all right, well, you're actually getting this from the university now as well. So maybe I'm not quite as enchanted with the thought of providing this for you, or I think I'm overstating that.
Well, it's a good question. And that may be a case-by-case basis on how the individual donor may feel. But a lot of times the relationship comes with, a Grant, a Joey, a Tim, a Kitley, one of the head coaches, and that's where the relationship with donor is. And the coach can go, if you want to help me, this is what you need to do. If you really want to help me or see our program succeed, and those relationships would still be there. So if the coach is like, so that money needs to go through the university now, but some that are just like randomly donating, like, hey, I want to help the cause. I'm not exactly sure how to, they may have a difference of opinion on basically how this is working. A good question. I just don't think people realize how much things could potentially change here in the next. Nothing for like this fall, but I think that the timetable on a lot of what you read for the revenue sharing could be in place by a year from this fall. And I think that with that, you see hints of the following: unlimited scholarships, roster limits specifically for football. You see, all kinds of things thrown out. And so I'm not exactly prepared to like wrap my head around what this may look like.
Yeah.
And so I just choose to enjoy 2024 season in its existence as it gets closer, because I just think there's a lot of things that could come with the revenue sharing, because I don't know what sports it will extend to. I don't know, like the roster limit / unlimited scholarships. That seems like an oxymoron. I don't know what that comes with and what sports that we're talking about, because like the folks at The Athletic have hinted at, some of the like sports with partial scholarships, like a Texas Tech baseball, for example. They could start giving 40 scholarships if they wanted to, like full rides, whereas
Yeah.
they've been held to 11.7. But you also may be limited to like, okay, you can only have so many players on your football team. Well, okay, we have 85 scholarships, but I got 120. Like with the walk-on program and all that stuff. So you're telling me I can't have any walk-ons anymore? I mean, so we'll just kind of see how this goes. But yeah, there's a lot to consider, not just from the donor, but I'm not sure what it's all going to look like just yet. But change is coming. I just don't know exactly what the magnitude of what that's going to look like yet. But yeah, it'll probably affect the donor. Sure. I mean, maybe it'll attract more. Maybe it'll attract less. I'm not real sure yet.
Yeah. Well, there's always going to be those guys out there that want to play college general manager, and that's fine. More power to you if you got the cash. I mean, there's going to be folks that are not impacted in any way, shape, or form. But I also think I've seen this response from some of our viewers in the YouTube comments talking about the revenue sharing angle. Hey, when you're actually getting revenue shared with you, then maybe you don't need a scholarship. Maybe that's not just a given that you get a scholarship, which I know is a total like turning the college sports world upside down and shaking it by its ankles. So that would be a total dynamic change. But that does remind me of my long sought after duffel bag protocol that I've wanted to put into place for college sports. When a student athlete shows up on campus nowadays, a scholarship student athlete, they most often will think, okay, now you owe me. When in reality, it's like, no, we've already given you the scholarship. You owe us your time and your skill as a wide receiver. Now, that argument doesn't really resonate with them, regardless of its factuality or reality. But I've said for a long time now, fine, let's just get them when they show up here and say, all right, I got a duffel bag equivalent of a scholarship value, or I've got the scholarship. By the way, you can use the duffel bag on a scholarship if you still want to play school, or you can use it on Kip's Big Boy or whatever, the Heidi-Ho, whatever you want to use it on. And I got to say, 10, 15 years ago, whenever I was banging that drum, it was a pipe dream, stupid, silly conversation to have. I'm not so sure that we may not be edging over time closer and closer and closer to Casey Cowan's duffel bag protocol, and that is trademark. So make sure you're giving me credit whenever that does come to pass. Okay, let's wrap it up on a football front. First, today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Never sweat buying tickets to your favorite events again with Gametime. It's always a breeze using the Gametime app where you're going to find the best last-minute deals, and I love being able to scout out a view from any seat before pulling the trigger. And, of course, it's always at the lowest price, guaranteed. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it begins, which means you can finish off that last beer at the tailgate at your own pace, because Gametime is the place to find last-minute seats to any event. They give you the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets, but not just fast and easy, also secure and simple to use. So right now, download the Gametime app and create an account and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem our promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today for last-minute tickets at the lowest price, guaranteed. Let's talk Red Raider quarterbacking, Chris, because there's this kind of simmering on the back burner conversation this summer about one Behren Morton and a shoulder, an AC joint, a health status, however granular we want to get with it. But we get questions, I don't know, maybe every week, every day, every few days on the status of one Behren Morton. So whenever I give you his name, Behren Morton, what's coming to mind right now as we sit here in mid-May?
Yeah, as it relates to like his shoulder issue, I'm gonna say that my word here, it'll be a bit more boring here. I'm not gonna go in the the Mr. Rogers or Kip's Big Boy, but my word here is discipline, and here's why. I think that Behren he's kind of like a gym rat, equivalent from a football player. He just loves being out on the field and throwing the guys and all these things. And I'm just going to gather that, I think that it was, I don't know, overworked or just put too much stress on that shoulder too soon. as they got into spring football or leading up to spring and all that stuff. And you could see a quarterback throwing 150 to 200 passes on a spring practice day if it's a lengthy one, with all the drills and all the stuff that comes with it, because warming up, I mean, everything. It doesn't, you start. So I think that everybody needs to be very disciplined and mindful here of making sure, and he needs to be disciplined of just not just letting it chill for a bit, and not, which is probably really hard for all involved. Probably mostly Behren, because it's like, dude, I feel okay, but it may not necessarily be okay yet, and that's what the tricky thing about that injury is. They'll tell you, like, it kind of plays tricks on your mind, because you kind of feel okay, but then if you can't, it feels fine, but then some overuse and you're like, okay, it's not healed up yet, but you see what I mean? So he's got to be disciplined, even though he may feel okay, to just let it heal, and whether we get into late June or mid-July or whatever it is, it's just going to be discipline, which is probably very difficult. And hopefully he's been that since he was shut down, like, I don't know, what's that been, 6 weeks ago? So it's already probably a pretty good chunk of time that's passed, but it's just discipline right now. And I think that's probably difficult, because, okay, you're making me disciplined on not doing something that I really want to do. And that's probably tough.
My word for Behren Morton right now, more so in a broad view kind of way, is simply untapped. I still don't know what this guy is as a quarterback. I mean, had high hopes whenever he signed up to be a Red Raider about him being a dynamic, impactful playmaker for you. He's been held back by some things outside of his control. He had to bide some time behind Tyler Shuck as well. And then the injury storyline set in and unfortunately has continued. And who knows what the future will hold if we ever actually get to see this resource be tapped to its true and full extent, Chris. And I know he's still got a fair amount of time to do it here at Texas Tech. Mm-hmm. But I still feel like we've seen, close to nothing as far as him being kind of unleashed, feeling good, go out there, spin it, and do your thing. Is that fair? I mean, are you feeling some of that as well? Because I just feel like it's always been kind of in a box whenever he's been out there.
The golly, was this trying to remember back, the game at Oklahoma State, his first start, I think.
Yes.
Okay. And this was his first real action, and they just kind of put him out there and was like, hey man, get after it, dude. And
62 attempts that day.
And he threw for close to 400.
Yeah, 379.
Okay.
Jaron Bradley went insane. I mean, that was like his high water mark.
And that was but it was like one of the last series of the very last plays of the first half. He's in the backfield, and a rusher comes around and gets kind of low, and Behren kind of comes down a bit, and it wasn't a dirty hit per se, but he kind of just jumped up or something, kind of like tweaked that ankle, and he kind of started limping. He stayed in there, and then he clearly was compromised because it was a high ankle sprain. So that was one of the only halves that we've really seen of him healthy. Because from that point on, that first year, he dealt with that high ankle sprain, okay? And he just kind of wasn't 100%. High ankle sprains are just a pain. It's kind of like the AC joint sprain he's got. They're not major catastrophic injuries. However, they take time to heal. So that was something he dealt with then. Well, then last year, it's like he all of one or two series, and he comes in, he gets sacked. Or hit after he lets the ball go, gets landed on, shoulder hurt. So that was the whole year with that. And so it is untapped, but it's also, he's been compromised the entire time. Is this bad luck? Is he just injury prone? I don't think it's fair to call him injury prone, but this is what people called Alan Bowman. And it's like, it's not necessarily fair when you get hit and your lung punctures, or you get sandwiched and again you puncture your other lung, or you get landed on like a lot of quarterbacks do, and your collarbone breaks at the University of Arizona. But you know what I mean? It's
like the offensive line gets their butts kicked. You get folded in half like a chair. People say, "Oh, this quarterback's injury prone."
Yeah. So I think it's fair to say untapped. I think it's kind of been we could have gone with tease or something, because you haven't been able to see the total picture here, because he's been compromised pretty much 90% of the time of the snaps that he's taken here. He's had something wrong with him, like not just an ailment, something minor. No, like something fairly substantial, like that would hurt his movement or hurt his mobility to be able to throw the ball, whether it's ankle or shoulder. So anyway, but untapped is probably dead on.
Yeah, things that like result in prior to the game, you wondering, is he going to be able to give it a go? I know they're not all necessarily game time, but did he practice this week? Has he done anything? Hey, and by the way, I'm glad you bring up that Oklahoma State game. 62 attempts that day. Pretty dang good game for him, 379. Next time around against West Virginia, pretty good game again. Throws for 325 on 45 attempts. Has not approached that attempt number until the most recent time we saw him. That was 43 attempts. Completed 27 of them against the Cal Golden Bears, 3 touchdowns against a pick. So maybe our most recent memory was as close as we had seen since our first memory of Behren Morton getting that kind of action. That could, in some roundabout kind of way, be encouraging. But there's no question that until we see him looking good, feeling good, and doing it consistently, and hopefully an offensive line helping him in that effort this season, that it will remain a question. All right. Would love to hear from you on any of these subjects. So dive into the YouTube comments. Let us know what you think. Get your brain power to work. And it's a psychological thing every day on Locked On Texas Tech. Chris, appreciate your time as always, man. Enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Kip, neighborhood, discipline.
McFeely.
Fred McFeely.
Speaking of discipline, don't be a McFeely out there today. Be a gentleman. Wherever you are doing whatever.
Share your little car, your toy car with Sally. She needs one too, man.
That's right. All right. For Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Get subscribed if you're not already on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss a thing. And we hope to see you back for the next round of Locked On Texas Tech.